Oh God.
Hi.
Like put on lipstick without looking in the mirror.
It's a pretty color. I like it a lot.
Thank you. But I was like, oh God. I was like, hello. Like
No, oh
running
my
around
gosh.
this morning. But thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining me. I feel like so upset that I didn't get to go to the party last night, so I kind of need you to fill me in on like how it was, how you're feeling. Congratulations, by the
Thank
way. This
you.
is like so exciting, and I'm so excited to talk to you like 2 days
Same.
later.
It was so fun. I really I feel like a lot of book events like are all the same. And so I was trying to do something that felt a little different. And I feel like when you have that, it's like, oh, it could really go either way. I was like, either this is going to be like a great success or everybody's going to think this is like the lamest, most terrible thing ever. Because we were really just playing games. It was like chatting about romance stuff. And I think it went really well. I mean, it was a great group of authors, but yeah, it was fun. It was good. And like the chat, like the people who were attending like were very active in the chat. And so yeah, I think it went well. It was good. I mean, yeah, I'm sort of like happy to not be doing a lot of like this like bookstore events, where it's like you sit and another author like asks you questions about, I don't know. I find like, and then people are just sitting there and I don't know. I feel like that always ends up being a little dry. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, it was good. It was really fun.
No, I totally understand. It looked like it was so much fun. I saw that video on your story of Lynn Painter with the red flags and everybody going back and forth, and I think that's super fun. I'm so
Yeah.
glad it went well. I was literally thinking about it all last night. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope
Like it'd
like
be fun
I
to just be in
hear about it.
pajamas. I know.
Yeah, it's brilliant too. Like just getting to be cozy and
Oh my
comfortable.
God. I
I love
know.
that.
I have an in-person thing tonight and I'm like, oh, I have to like get dressed. Like, okay,
Maybe not. Maybe
here
you
we
just
go.
don't.
I'll just show up in my pajamas again and be like, hey everyone,
Exactly. I
ready.
was also super, super excited when I learned that you were from South Carolina, having
I
been from North Carolina too. I think that is
and
like the best.
and I actually found out we have a mutual friend.
We
Um,
do?
yes.
Oh my gosh,
No, it's
that
so
is the
funny. Like what
coolest thing.
she was like, she like texted me and she's like, I know her. And I was like, from what? She's like, from North Carolina.
It's so funny and that is so cool. I literally love how big the world is, but how small it feels sometimes.
I know, especially like the Southern world. I feel like it's like, oh, like there's always, it's just like sort of delightful. I know, like even when you're not, it's like even in New York, I feel like I run into people and I'm like, yay.
I was literally talking to another author about how it's so funny, especially moving to a bigger city from the South. Like, at least for me, it was like in the South, people also really talk to each other all the time,
Yeah.
like walking on the street, and you're like, oh, good
Oh
morning,
my
good
God.
morning.
Like,
Did you,
hi, how are you? Like, how's your health today? Yeah.
yeah, do you feel like you still experience that in New York, or when did you move to New York? And like, was that kind of like a, oh, wait, we don't talk to each other, or do you talk
It
to
was really,
people?
it was really weird. I still do talk to people. I think I probably talk to people more than most people. I mean, I think there's definitely like you're walking down the street, like there's no one saying hello as they walk down the street in the way that like that's abnormal. But yeah, I moved here. I have lived here for 18, 17 years. So, and my husband grew up here, so like he can't live anywhere else. Like he's not capable. He's like one of the like Manhattan people that like if you take him to like Brooklyn, he's like, "Oh, where am I?" But yeah, I mean, I still very much feel like I don't think, first of all, I don't think you can be a New Yorker if you didn't grow up in New York. Like people always say that. And so I feel very much like of two places because I've lived here long enough where like I love it and you know, I want to stay here and I like there's so much to do and see and it's exciting in that way, but I also like yeah, I mean wherever you grow up that kind of like imprints on you in a way. So it's like I mean I also have to say like Southern stories and Southern shows and there's so much great art I think that comes out of the South. Um so you never really feel like you're far away from it. And there's so many people living here too. Like I think the best thing about New York is like you find your little pockets of people who are like, oh, okay. And then you like stick with them. So And I mean, and that's true in professions too. It's like you find your other writer friends, you find whatever, and then it's like, okay, and then you have your Southern people. So it's like, it's really nice, I think, like in New York, where you can always sort of like find your people and your place. But no, I mean, we go back all the time because my parents are there. So I feel like we kind of get to have like the best of both things.
Totally. When did you realize that storytelling was something you wanted to pursue? Were there any books that you read growing up or authors who have influenced that journey for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that I would write fiction. I mean, I started in nonfiction and I was in journalism for most of my career. So I always wanted to tell stories, but I think I felt like I had to be more serious. I don't know. It was like, like, oh, this is like what I'm reading is frivolous, whereas like I'm gonna do important things. And then I mean, I was just like a voracious reader as a kid. I read I mean, like a lot, and a lot of the like, I would say like precursor to romance things, like I did like the Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley High. And like, I mean, I had all of those books. I mean, I loved The Giver. I loved everything Roald Dahl. Um, so, I always was reading. And then as I got older, I was reading not as much romance. I think I sort of felt like I was supposed to, I don't know. It's like you sort of go into this thing. I mean, I did a lot of theater. I was definitely like a theater kid. So like musicals and theater. Um, I mean, I was not, that was never going to be, I was not at a level of like that could be my profession. But I, I always sort of, so I mean, storytelling across the board has always just been like a huge part of my life. But then, um, I really started reading a lot more romance um, when things, I went through a period of my life that was really hard. My mother-in-law got sick and passed away. I dealt with a lot of fertility stuff when I was trying to have more kids, and I just found that I could not read anything or watch anything that wasn't a little bit happy, or that like wouldn't end happily. So I just started reading so much romance, and sort of during COVID, I started writing my first book kind of on a whim of like, I just would like to tell a story that is not real at this moment. And I just really enjoyed it. Like I think that was kind of the thing I started writing and I was like, oh, like maybe this could be something because it wasn't my like I think a lot of people have that dream of like, I'm going to write a novel and they've written a bunch of things before they get published. And that wasn't me. I'd always written nonfiction. I mean, I had cookbooks um, and articles, but I mean, it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I think because I had read so much of my life that I don't know, it was always kind of in there somewhere, but
Yeah, no, your career has spanned cookbooks and a hugely popular TV show, Potluck. You're in your 16th season, if I read correctly, which is
yeah,
so amazing.
wild. I
It's
know.
so cool.
Not getting canceled. It's amazing.
I love
I
it.
mean, you're
No.
on a Netflix show that had 4 seasons, which I feel like is practically unheard of. So like,
No,
like
I
amazing.
appreciate that. We're like, I've been such like an anxious ball of energy waiting to find out if we'll go
Of
five. So 16 is like fantastic. I was
course.
like, whoa, that's incredible. Want to ask quickly when your love for cooking and baking first developed, and if there was like a person or experience that particularly inspired you.
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, my grandmother was a huge baker, an amazing cook. And it's funny because my mom is a lawyer and like is not a cook. So I cooked a lot in my family because my mom wasn't super interested in cooking. But my grandmother taught me so much. Um, and other relative, we had a lot of women cooking around us, and so I always really wanted to be in the food space, and I did like an art. I like wrote recipes for like the Charleston newspaper when I was a kid, and like I always really like loved that, but I didn't see it as like a viable career path. I mean, I think again, it's like all these pressures of like what you should be doing as a kid. I didn't want to work in restaurants. Like I worked in restaurants in high school and college, and I was like, this isn't a lifestyle that is sustainable to me. Um, just I mean the hour, I mean it's just a really hard life. And so I didn't really think that I could do anything with it. And then I started originally like in news and eventually, I mean, it was interesting because when I was younger, there was like this moment in time where like sort of food content went from being like just on television and in magazines to being more online, to being more accessible. And so I was kind of able to like sneak in. Whereas now I feel like there are the food influence. I mean, to sort of get into that space now is so competitive and really kind of unbelievable because of social media, really. Um, but at that time, it was all sort of nascent. So I mean, I started working at a food publication online, and then I pitched my show, and I'm sort of like yeah, I'm kind of astonished they've just like let me keep going as long as they've let me keep going. But it's really kind of just for like love of food and like chatting with people about the things that they love in cooking. And so, I mean, public television is such a different beast because it's like it's very much like it can be quiet and it can be slow in a way that a lot of other things can't. But yeah, so I feel very lucky that like I always had a love of food, I always had a love of cooking, and somehow I was kind of able to be like, oh, well, I love telling stories and I love food, and like what are the ways to kind of bring this together? Um, yeah, which is just hugely lucky. And then when I started writing fiction, it's like I would always like there's so much food in my fiction because it's just yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know how to tell a story without having food be like its own character.
I think that is so cool. Before I ask you about that transition and how you approached blending those two things together, because I think you did that so masterfully, if I can speak this morning. Sorry, I'm still waking up.
It's Monday.
I know it's Monday,
No.
but which is like a yay, new week, but also it's
I
like,
know, but
oh my
also like
gosh, it's like
you're
Monday.
on Monday brain.
Yeah, but so is there like a go-to dish? I feel like I have those same memories of like my Grammy and I cooking together and
Yeah.
baking and that was like so special to me. So is there a meal that's like stayed with you forever, or what is your go-to dish right now? Or are there like certain
Yeah.
ingredients or flavors that you find yourself constantly reaching for?
I mean, I think I am I would say like because I'm doing like family kid cooking. I often like the flavors that I'm reaching for are often the things that are like very easy that add a lot of flavor without a lot of work. So I mean, I think like a lot of Asian ingredients tend to do that, like miso paste and soy sauce and the like fish sauce. Like those are the things that I'm kind of like, oh, I'll just like stir fry a bunch of things and like throw that in there and then everything will be fine. But I think food also like really evokes memories for so many things. Like my grandmother made amazing pies. Like her pie crust, like she made it with like lard and like, I mean, it was so good. And she would make like strawberry rhubarb pie was kind of like her thing. So I really love, and I really find character in books like through like, well, what are the types of foods that they like? Like, what do they gravitate towards? So one of the things that I really wanted to do in Unlikely Stories, like, because Nora, the main character, is kind of a little bit of a people pleaser and she's a little bit sort of quieter. She's just like obsessed with baked goods, and that's kind of like a defining feature of her life. And one of the things that she makes is strawberry rhubarb cornbread, which kind of was like a little nod to my grandmother, a little nod to the South. Like it's but that's something that I make all the time because I feel like in New York there's always this moment where like the rhubarb and the strawberries like cross over each other seasonally. And so then I just find myself making everything strawberry rhubarb. And I've started like that strawberry rhubarb cornbread is like the thing that I make. Like there's like a 6 week moment in time where I'm like, this is what I'm gonna make every day. Cause it's like the tart and the sweet and the like, the like, nuttiness of the corn, like for the cornbread. And it's just, I don't know. So yeah, it's interesting because I think food in storytelling is not often used enough, but I think right, like if you think about a person that you love, you can probably think about food memories with them. It's we're always sort of gathered or like what they drink or what they eat or what desserts they like or what meals they make or whatever. So it's, I think it's yeah, I think it's a really important piece of any kind of writing or storytelling.
Feel like the black and white cookies in Unlikely Story were also such an iconic part of the book, at least for me, because I'd never had them before.
Oh my God,
And you describe
they're
them as
hilarious.
like such a like key part to being a New Yorker. And I was like,
Yes,
why didn't I have one when I went to New
have to
York?
come and try.
I was like,
They're
wait.
so weird because they're basically like half cake, half cookie. They're like so, and it was funny because I was like, I have to include a recipe for them, and I was like, it's really hard because people are going to make them and be like, what is this abomination? Like it's not either of these things, but it's like an airy, it's like a very like cakey cookie. I don't know, but they're yeah, they're delicious and they're very like New York iconic. Yeah, you have to come and get one.
Oh my gosh. I know I was literally in New York a few months ago and I was like, I didn't see them anywhere. I'm kind of obsessed with trying one.
You're you're
I
like on the
know.
way. You know what? I think it just means it's time for a trip back to New York. Like you just need a real black and white cookie.
That's very true. Yeah. I don't think I did circle back and ask you what that transition was, like how you approached it. I feel like you kind of answered it, but can you walk us through your writing process, and how you kind of get into the zone creatively?
I mean, I mean, it really was like, I feel like, yeah, a lot of art comes out of difficult things. And it's like, during COVID, I just was like, I had been working on a cookbook and, my show was sort of put on pause as everything was. Like, we had filmed like half a season when COVID started. And then we tried to do like the rest of it like over Zoom. And it was just terrible. I mean, I think like food stuff that is not in person just like does not work. Um, so I was kind of like itching for a creative outlet and I just started writing. And my first book, Recipe for Second Chances, was kind of based on the way that my husband and I met, but we didn't break up. So, I mean, this is a story of people who were apart for 10 years, but it was kind of this idea of like, if you fall in love really young and you sort of feel like it's the right thing, like, could that stick with you? And so that idea had sort of percolated because I had had some conversations with friends who'd also met their partners really young. And it was this sort of idea of like, if it's meant to be, would it have been meant to be? I like, even if you broke up, would you have found your way back to each other? And I just couldn't get that idea out of my head. So I started writing. Um, and my process for that book was really, it just was like, I write really fast. Like when I have an idea in my head, I have to like get it out. I have to like live with the characters. Like I'm sort of, I can't be really doing anything else. I can't be reading anything else because I'm kind of like in it. So I write really fast and then I sort of step away from it and then reread it and have other people read it. And I like to edit a lot. Like I love feedback, because I feel like it's kind of like not cheating, but I mean, it's like, oh my God, like other people are going to tell me how to make my stuff better. That's amazing. So, with the first book, it was kind of like it was a learning curve in the sense that like I, like my agent that I did my cookbooks with like doesn't do fiction. So I had to get a whole new agent. It was like a whole other process. Now I think it's easier because it's like I know if I'm writing, like, okay, like I have a contract for that and I'm gonna be writing it. But I mean, my process is really that I sit down and I make myself just write for a large portion of the day so that I can kind of like get a draft on paper and then I kind of take it from there and edit as I go. But yeah, I have to like be with the people. I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I'm always curious with actors where it's like you have to sort of become a person. I think for writers, it's like we don't have like the physical manifestation of that, but we do have to like live with people, which is why I think it's important to sort of find those way in of like, what are their hobbies and where are they from and what do they like to eat and all those little things, some of which don't even end up making it into the book, but you have to really kind of know someone to be able to write them, especially um I write in first person, so I mean it's really like you are in it with this person. So yeah, my process is, I know some people write slowly and I wouldn't even know how to do that because I'm like, if I'm thinking about it, I'm not thinking, I can't think about anything else.
It's so interesting. I feel like your character's an unlikely story. That was something that I was really excited to talk to you about. They feel so nuanced, and we get to spend quite a bit of time with them over the course of a few months. They're just really multidimensional and real. So, how do you approach developing them? I just feel like even the friends we meet along the way, Tom and Meryl and Dane, like they're
Yeah.
all so they feel so whole to me, and I feel like I read books in that way where I can envision them jumping off the page and I see the movie in my head, and they all were so clear to me, and That was something I really enjoyed. So
Yeah.
how do you like for every single person, does that get confusing or hard to like
I
keep
think that's
them?
why I have to write fast because I have to be like, and I mean, I spend a lot of time, like I will spend like months sort of like writing notes or keeping like, and then once I start, it's like I have to like have the people there before I write, and then they kind of change and they like grow into themselves. Like often they'll start, I mean, it's funny, like Eli as a character, I was really, I've been obsessed with the West Wing forever, and I love the character of Josh Lyman. And so in my mind, like Eli kind of started from that, of like, and often I will take like a character or a person or something that I really love and feel that I know pretty well. Um, and then they become themselves like through that. So everyone's always like, this is this person. I'm like, well, no, because they kind of become their own person, but sometimes they start as a version of someone. Um, and especially, I mean, it's like, Tom and Meryl were, I mean, when I worked in news, I mean, right when I graduated college, there was an anchor and a production coordinator who, I mean, they would like flirt with each other nonstop, and they were both like elderly, and I found them to be like such entertaining people. And so it's like it started there. It's like you find these like people and their quirks and their traits, and then they move off from them. And so yeah, I mean, I think that specificity is really important. I also think the nuance is important because I think especially for women, we often see like, especially in the romance space, and I think we're getting such amazing writing in the romance space. So like there's so many great books that have great characters, but it's like I think a lot of the women are sort of portrayed in such a way where like they're not allowed to make mistakes. They're not allowed, everyone's so afraid of people hating their characters that they make them kind of like, it's like when you answer like a question for like a job interview where it's like, what are your weaknesses? And you're like, oh, I try too hard or something. It's like we get these women characters that are like they have no real weaknesses. And I don't know any women like that. And I love a lot of women that have many weaknesses also. So it's really important to me to have women that sort of have a lot of things. It's also really important to me. I mean, I will never write a book where women are fighting each other. Like that's always been like a important, like female friendship. Like it's a love story, and obviously that's always going to be the main story, but I think you can also get at the nuance of people sort of through their friends and their friendships and how they have relationships with people outside of their romantic relationships. So um it was really interesting because I've often written books with like big groups of friends. And for this book, I was like, well, what about, like she's a little bit more of an internal person. So she really has one friend, and yeah, and I mean, I love like Dane is such a character. I like loved writing her. But then it was like, and then along the way, she makes these sort of like elderly man friends, which was just like very amusing to write. But yeah, I think you can get a lot from a person sort of like through their friendships. So because we are different people in romantic relationships than we would be in our like everyday friendships and with our families. We're sort of stuck in one version of ourselves in our romantic relationships, but somehow like through our friendships, we're sometimes like the most honest version of ourselves. So I think that helps too.
I think it's so important to feel seen by other people, to have people who see you and that you see. And I think that that's so beautiful and something I also really enjoyed. Reading and how Tom answered the phone and was like, "Yeah, Nora's mom, this is
Yeah.
like not okay." And
No.
having friends who stick up for you. And also, Nora's role as a therapist and her own therapy sessions with Ari stood out to me as an equally important aspect of the book. So
Yeah.
I was curious how you approached making therapy such a meaningful part of her character as a career, but then also as something that she does to care for herself.
Yeah, I mean, I love, I mean, I myself am a practitioner of going to therapy. I read a lot of therapy memoirs. I felt like that was important. And I had three different therapists read drafts of the book because I was like, what I really don't want is for someone in therapy or who is a therapist to like read this book and be like, no therapist would say that. And I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but like there's an ethical dilemma that, Nora faces, um, and finding the balance of like how, what would be realistic here to not cross over any boundaries, but also still like let the story be fun. I mean, I think a lot of fiction, I mean, as I'm sure you have seen, when you do multi seasons of the same characters, like my God, you have to put them in some unrealistic situations sometimes. But it's like finding the truth in those things and like what wouldn't cross the line and what would. Um, but yeah, I found it, I think we are all, as the world gets more digital, as we share more, we're also increasingly lonely, I think. And so I find that like the public versus private personas that we all have, and trying to find the ways to like be truthful in both of those scenarios is something that, I mean, people have grappled with forever, but I think increasingly as we sort of exist in this like digital space of where how we project ourselves, I thought it would be really interesting to kind of explore that. Um and I just, yeah, every therapist I know is also in therapy. So I just thought like what a great way to like get into this character, um to have kind of a therapist who has a very different style from her, so um so that was really fun. I mean, I found Ari really fun to write because she just, got to like say what she thought in a way that I think Nora can't do. So it was kind of nice to have that juxtaposition of like different therapists. Because yeah, therapists also have their own problems, like
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. And like humanizing that because I think like I'm sure that's like not always a thought when you like know something but you almost don't know it until somebody says it and you're like,
Yeah,
well, of course. Like,
that's
yeah.
so right.
It was funny because it wasn't like that for me, but it was also kind of like that for me. I was reading it and I was like, of course a therapist like would have her own therapist. Like therapists also
Yeah.
like
Like,
deal with
wait,
their
my
own
therapist is a
things.
person too? It's kind of like kids and
Yeah,
their parents, and like at some point you're like, oh, you're a real person outside of this, huh?
exactly. It's
Like
like, oh, you're
teachers,
also like living this like for essentially like the first time too, and having your own experiences. Like, oh, you're not just a parent. Like, yeah,
Right.
like you're talking about, the book's exploration of, people showing different sides of themselves depending on their environment. You explored that theme in such a cool way. And so what do you hope readers take away from that aspect of the story?
I mean, I really hope that, first of all, I think like reaching out and expressing yourself is something that I think a lot of us have trouble with. I think especially like women who are readers often fall into the category of, we're a little bit more internal, we're perhaps overthinking a little bit more. Um, so, I really felt like Nora's journey of like trusting her friends more, allowing more people in, both friendship wise and relationship wise. And I think that that is important to me because it's something that I'm always reminding myself of is to like, if a friend does something that bothers me, perhaps just say it, and in a, not in a difficult way, but just like let people be there for you in ways where you maybe would expect them to just automatically know something when of course they wouldn't. And I think also the thing with Eli is like the not judging a book by its cover, which I mean is such an obvious thing, but we do all of those. And I think especially men, who don't get to be in therapy as much or don't feel like they can be as much, that just because somebody presents as confident or sure of themselves, that you really don't know what's happening internally. And I think that that's really important for us to always remember, especially because we do, see what everyone else is going through and we think like, wow, someone's posting their life and it's so amazing. And it's like you have no idea what's going on. And I mean, I thought about that a lot in writing this book because my first cookbook came out when I was dealing with a lot of miscarriage. And everybody around me was like, this must be the greatest time in your life. And I was like, it's hilarious because it's actually like, I am the most miserable I've ever been. And everyone thinks I'm like killing it, And I was like, and on some level, it's like, I almost wish that I had just said that because I think we all do better when we know that like nothing is as straightforward as it seems. But I think as we like increasingly sort of have these projections of ourselves in the world, I think it creates so much internal strife for people, So I think it's an important moment for people to sort of consider like what they're seeing online and what is real and what is not, and recognizing that kind of everybody has their own stuff and that it's okay. And also like it's okay to talk about it, Like I think like we all feel like we're supposed to project that everything is perfect. And I mean, I think Nora, it's like if you're a therapist, everybody relies on you to have your shit together. Of course, like it's okay. She has her shit together professionally. Like she can still give you advice and also be a mess in her own life. Like that's okay. Doesn't make her a
Yeah.
worse therapist.
I feel like there were so many nuggets of wisdom along those lines in the book. Like there was something that I wrote down too of how Nora said sometimes it's easier to keep people tethered to the single dimension that we've kind of put
Yeah,
them on.
assigned to them.
Yeah. And I just thought that was really incredible. And for such like a light, there was such like a lighthearted feel to it. It was fun. I loved like the inspiration of You've Got Mail.
Yeah.
I loved that movie. And so reading that that was a part of it, I was like, this is just like so fun, so charming, so witty, but then also to be like hit by some of those sentences and like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like yeah, it really does, I think, encourage readers to think about the way that we're presenting ourselves and the way, sometimes it's okay to just be vulnerable and um, all of those things that you were saying, I think it's just incredible. It was interesting to see how, they felt more comfortable being vulnerable behind a screen too and being
Yeah.
open and how Nora learned to be empowered in her vulnerability, in her friendships and her romantic relationships. And before she knew even that it was Jay and Eli, the same
Yeah.
person, which I'll put like a little spoiler thing for,
Spoiler
but
alert. But I also, it's funny because everyone's like, I feel like the people who haven't liked it been like, it's such an obvious twist. I'm like, I wasn't really writing it thinking that anyone would assume anything else. Like it's like if we say something's inspired by You've Got Mail, like we know, like we kind of know that these two people are the same person. But yeah, it's been funny to see as people read it, where some people are like, I was shocked. And I'm like, really? But I'm like, oh, okay. But I think that, yeah, I mean, and listen, like, to me, it's what I love the most about the romance genre is like you can explore some pretty like difficult things through the lens of something that's also really fun and joyful and quirky and funny and that like that no matter how like high the stakes get, like we know that it's going to end with these two people together. Like you are never in doubt of that. And I just think like in a world where so much is uncertain, it's really nice through books to be able to explore a lot of difficult themes like in a I don't want to say like a safe space, but I mean in a space that you feel like it's all going to end up okay. And I feel like that with storytelling, with my kids, like whenever we watch a movie and they're like scared in the middle of it, I'm like, it's a kid's movie, it's going to end up okay. And that is like a comforting thing to them. And I'm like, just because we're adults, like doesn't mean we also don't want that a little bit. So it's like, it's okay to know that this ends well, but also like, yeah, maybe we're also going to explore like our deep loneliness as humans, like we can do that
yeah,
too. Like, and it's like we want both. Like I certainly like I want to laugh when I'm reading. I want to like have all that joy. But I think like if romance can't like make us think about our humanity, then kind of like what are we doing? Like I think you can have both.
for sure. There were so many nuggets of wisdom, like I said, and so many things that I was like, whoa. Favorite character of mine though was George. I think he added so much warmth and so much charm to the story. Do you
George is a
have
real dog.
I was like, do you have a dog like George in your life?
So George is based. So, I mean, I have never named a character after a real person, but I did. My sister, I had a dog named George who was exactly George in the book. And he was a menace and he was just like my sister got him in exactly the same way that Nora gets George. Like she went on a trip after a breakup and was like, what I really need is a curmudgeonly dog. And she like met George and nobody wanted to adopt George. And so he passed away last year. And
Um,
when I was right, I was just like, he is a care. I was like, we need to like to have George live on like through a book. So yeah, I mean, I think animals like it's funny. It's like I feel like there are some writers who really like the animals in the book become almost as much of characters. Like Abby Jimenez in one of her first books, her dog Stuntman Mike is a character, and it's like I know this book. Or like Tara DeWitt in her book Savor It, like she has a goose named Gary. Like I feel like Gary was like one of my favorite characters in the book, and it's I mean, it's funny. Like I say this, my dog is nothing like George. She's like literally just like lying. Like I have like the
Oh.
calmest, like quietest little dog. But yeah, I felt like George. I also felt like for a character like Nora, it's like what could make her angry, you know? And it's like we have this, we love this like enemies to lovers thing. And often I find enemies to lovers like it can be the most satisfying, but it also can be, it falls so flat if the people are fighting over something that doesn't feel real or earned. And I just, my sister and her dog that like everyone else on earth hated except for her, and she was so protective over, to me, it was like, such a good in for this character of like where could she get like feisty with someone, and it would be like, oh, if she had like a vulnerable cranky dog, you know, because I think like dog people would go to the end of the earth for their dog. So it's like, you know, it's like someone banging on the roof above you, like okay, that's annoying, but it's like if it's like traumatizing your like anxious dog, like that felt, I don't know, it felt very true to me in a way that I think like the enemies to lovers thing is always hard because it's like you really want there to be a real reason, but also not so much of a reason that like there's a like there can't be like a great reason they were enemies and therefore you hate the other person, you know, because they were so awful that they deserve to be enemies. So I don't know. So yeah, like a cantankerous dog felt like such a good way in. Yeah, it was kind of nice to like bring him back sort of through that. Yeah.
No, I love that. I love it so much. It reminded me so much. Even cat people, I feel like relate. He's in his bed if you can see him. I like his name is Jack. So it was also funny to me that George had such a human name. And George reminded me a lot of Jack. Um,
Not
which
of paws and whiskers. I know with this with the hilarious names. Yeah, I wanted to make, I
yeah.
really wanted to make a man a cat person. I feel like we always, I love a man who's a cat person. I just feel like it's so endearing. And I also love that it was sort of like foisted upon him and then he became obsessed with them. Like just
It was so sweet. And I feel like in that same regard, like there was this idea of finding love in unexpected places. Like I think he really loved them. And also the
yeah.
love of friends, that platonic love, but that support that everyone needs. And then the romantic love, of course. But how do you think that love manifests in surprising ways?
I think it's really that it's the like when we have a love story, I think there has to be so much love going around, you know, because I think romantic love is very important, but I don't believe that any person is totally 100% fulfilled by having one monogamous partner and that's the only person that they get things from. Like I just don't think that that's, I don't think that's realistic, you know? And I think that we all have these people in our lives. I mean, the relationship with, you know, I had toyed around with having a flashback scene of Eli and his grandmother because I really felt like their relationship was so special, of these two kind of like prickly people that sort of understood each other. Um, but you know, it didn't work for a variety of reasons. And I think in the scene where he sort of goes to the plaque unveiling for her, you kind of get a sense of like the complexity of their relationship. But I think we have, you know, different phases of love in our life. You know, we have parents and grandparents, we have romantic partners, we have friends, and we have some friends that we grow out of, we have some friends that are for life. And so I think, and we have pets, you know, and so I think for a romance book to really succeed, you have to showcase a person like allowing a lot of love into their life. And I think often when you're starting someone on a journey, it's because they're missing that in a lot of ways. Or they're missing it, you know, they're not being themselves to the people that they love or whatever ways. And I think, you know, when with the romance, there are, I mean, in any genre fiction, there are beats that you really want to hit. And obviously you want to have this happily ever after at the end. Um, but I also think it's really important for your main characters to have gone on a journey that is not just like, I am now fulfilled by my romance, right? So um I think that's why for me, like side characters and pets and parents and grandparents and you know need to be in there because that is sort of what is fulfilling in our life. And some people have, you know, it's funny, like with my first book, my mom was like, her parents aren't that important to her. Like that's so weird. I was like, it's not that her parents aren't that important. It's just not a complicated relationship in her life, right? Like her, you know, like that's not the place where like she needs to grow. Um, and with Nora, I thought it would be really interesting to have like a complicated parental relationship again, but like nobody's a villain. I mean, that's also, I think, for me in my writing, something that's been very important is like there's no villains ever. Because I think it's very rare in life to have a true villain or a true hero or whatever. So I mean, I think um all of those complexities are important. So yeah, I mean, I think like love is what drives us. I mean, it's, you can love your job. And I mean, look at how many people you see who have like the greatest jobs, and then you find out that they're the most unhappy people. And then look at the people who we would think of as having very little in the world, and they're very content with their life because they have love around them. So, I mean, I think the romance genre gets sort of put into this like women's corner in the same way that I think a lot of like women's emotional TV gets put into those corners. But I actually think that it's exploring the most essential parts of us. And I wish more shows aimed at men did that without it having to be about like war and misery. But yeah, I mean, I think if you center love across a story, then you can always like find the journey in the heart of it, because I mean, that's where the most interesting journeys are. I mean, to
For
me.
sure. No, I agree 100%. I think the title Unlikely Story also hints at, unexpected twists and turns
Yeah.
that they'll both experience. Was it always a part of the vision for the book, or did it kind of evolve as you wrote it?
Well, I always wanted the twist. I mean, I really, but no, I mean, it was not titled Unlikely Story. I'm horrible at titles. I always like
Mm.
every book always has a name that's like, it's like this is the like, my first book, it's like I mean, that was just like the first book. And then the second book, I was like, this is the Ireland book. And then this book was the like, it was like the mistaken identity book. And I'm working on another book that I'm like, it's the memory book or whatever. It's like, so and then it comes to this moment where it's like you must come up with a title. And I'm like, oh God. But yeah, it was funny because everybody, I was like, I think I like Unlikely Story, and everybody was like, yes, that is a great title. But it is, I mean, it's because it is a true story. It's realistic enough, but it's also, I mean, it has this sort of hint of like not magic, but the like unlikely, things that are not. I mean, this scenario is not, but truth is stranger than fiction often. And so it's like, the odds of of your neighbor also being this person you've been speaking to, are clearly like a little bit in the realm of being unlikely, um, but hopefully it feels like it's grounded in a truth that, you know, sort of surpasses the unlikeliness of being in that scenario.
But it was so fun. But so do you like just spitball a bunch of things and be like, oh, I kind of like this one? How did it go from the
Mm.
mistaken identity story to unlikely story?
Oh my God. I mean, I end up writing down, and it's like it's like I keep like lists, it'll be like 40 or 50 titles, and it's like which one like sits with you and jumps out at you. And so many of them are so bad. Um, I mean, it's like really, and I think a lot of people like there's always the sort of people want like a punny title, or it's also been easy because I feel like with cookbooks, I really like straightforward names. I want like when you say the name of it, everybody knows what this book is about. And I feel like with fiction, I mean, that is so much harder because if you could explain what a book is about in a title, like it's probably not a great book. It's like it's hard to sort of although there are some that are great. Like I just read an advanced copy of Olivia Dade's next book, and it's called Zom Rom-Com. And it's like that is what it is. It's a zombie rom-com. It's like pretty great. So, like if there can be titles like that. But I really didn't, we also played around with like I feel like, it's like you hit on certain words like identities or like a pun on you've got mail or whatever, and none of that I mean, I just, I think the puns, and I also feel like people are doing a lot of like song lyric, it's like there's so many books with like a Taylor Swift song lyric as their title. Um, which like, okay, but no, I think, you need to have I mean, it's hard because covers and titles, I mean, we say not to judge a book by its cover, but I mean, we all do, right? It's like, does this cover speak to us? Does the title speak to us? And then does that little blurb speak to us? And we really went back and forth on the blurb of like how much to reveal, how much do we want people to believe that this is like a shocking twist versus something that you kind of go in knowing like, okay, this is a thing. that we kind of suspect the whole time, but we don't know how we're going to get there, right? And I think the twists in the book are like that you're sort of like, when are they going to find out? Who's finding out? What does he know? Like, does he know or does he not know? At what point are they going to like, what are the things, what are the near misses where like, oh, it could have come out so easily. Um, putting his number into WhatsApp instead of into her phone, or saying, Eleonora versus Nora, like all these little things. Like to me, that's where the fun of the twist is. But yeah, it was kind of like when they're writing the blurb copy of like, it's sort of like, so I mean, I feel like we kind of left it in the middle of like, if you really read it and focused on it, you would, and again, I mean, people have been describing it as You've Got Mail-esque. So then that kind of also, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
we
I thought it
know,
was
but
so fun. I thought it was so fun because knowing you've got mail, I was like, oh my gosh, wait. And that was a big question for me is, wait, does he know? Because
yeah.
then, like you were talking about the enemies to lovers, how sometimes it'll like borderline on like, wait, but that was like really bad. Like, I don't know if they should be
Yeah,
lovers. But it was
right.
so I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna feel if he knew this whole
The
time?
whole
Like,
time.
oh
I
my gosh, I
know.
was like, that might be really bad. And so it was like, it kept me on the edge of my seat. I was like, when is she gonna find out? And when is he? Like, it
Right.
was so fun. I thought it was just,
And then
it
who
was
knows at
such a
what point.
great, yeah, I mean, it was such a
Yeah.
great book. And I'm so excited to see more of everyone's reactions. I think that is just, it was so fun. It actually got me out of a reading slump. I had
Yay.
read a book that I didn't particularly enjoy, and it took me so long to read it that
Oh my God.
I
It's
just
so
kind of need a minute.
hard. It's hard when it's like you're sort of in it and you're like, I kind of want to know what happens, but like not enough. And then you're like not picking it up. And then yeah, starting books are the hardest, because it's like, and then once you're in it, you're like, oh, I'm with these characters and I just want to stay with them forever. And then it's like, oh, and now it's over. And now I have to like find someone new to love and care about. I mean, listen, that's why
Yeah.
people like TV with multiple seasons, because it's so comforting. I mean, you can just like stay with these people that you already know. It's why I think, in the romance space, people love the books that are series that continue on because it's like you already have that comfort level with people. But yeah, I mean, there's something like great about when you find a book that you're enjoying and then you're just like immersed in it. Yeah, and then it begets more. It's like more reading begets more reading because then you're like, I want this feeling again.
Yes, absolutely. And so I really appreciated that Unlikely Story gave that to me because I needed it. I was like, "Ah, I just need to I need to be with some characters that I really want to root for and really love.
I
And I
love
did. I feel like I fell in love with every character in the story. And it was such a fun read. I really enjoyed it. I also wanted to talk about on your Instagram because I always do like a little scroll. You mentioned a 40 for 40 plan that I think is just such a beautiful
Yeah.
idea. So can you tell me a little bit more about that, how it came about, and some of the acts of kindness and goals you've set for yourself?
Oh my goodness. It's been really fun. It came about because I was feeling sort of like this is a milestone. I should do something, but I want it to be fun. And I didn't want to have like, I don't know. And I started like by writing down like what are things I'd want to like accomplish by the time I was 40. And a lot of them it was like things that I had no control over, right? Like you want your book to like, you want to like hit some list, or you want to like get another book deal, or you want to like have your kids do whatever. And it's like, I was like, I don't want to set any goals for myself that I can't achieve, and I think often this happens with people with like New Year's resolutions, right? Where it's like, I'm going to lose all this weight. And it's like, well, what if you don't? So I kind of was like, well, what if I just set goals that were all things that I could do, like things that were just like easily achievable, very doable things, but that would take some effort. And so some of them are things that are going to go along throughout the year. Like I want to like take a walk in every neighborhood of New York. I want to do 40 acts of kindness. I want to, like do like I'm going to take my kids and play hooky with each of them for one day. And then there are things where it's like just a one-off thing of like I'm going to do like I mean I recently did one of the things was like take an aerial class because I've always been like that looks really fun, but like could I do it? It's like okay, great. I mean, they're all things that I can do. I just have to like put my mind to it. It's been really fun. I mean, this weekend, it was funny. One of the things on the list was like get dressed up really fancy to go somewhere not fancy. And my daughters are like, I have twin 5-year-old girls, so like they're obsessed with doing the list stuff with me. And so they were like, let's do it to go sign books. And I was like, oh God, like, am I gonna like rock up to like a bookstore in a ball gown? And I was like, you know what? But yes, because it's on the list and we're gonna go do it. So it's been really fun. And it's also kind of nice, like to sort of have these, I like, in like typical like OCD writer form, I put them into like, okay, like this month I'll do them for this and this. And so I sort of have it organized. But yeah, it's given me kind of like a fun, like step outside my comfort zone plan. And it was great because I came up with like half of them and then I sort of solicited feedback online, which is usually like a very bad idea, I think, for most things in life. But in this, I got so many great ideas from people. Um, so yeah, it was hard to kind of narrow it to 40 things, but
No, that is amazing. I think
I'm on
that's so
track.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so exciting. And I think that is like, it definitely inspired me to be like, oh, I wonder like what things like I could put on my list. Like you were saying, these achievable things. I really started thinking about like New Year's resolutions and yearly things as like aspirations for that same reason of like, oh gosh, well,
Yeah.
some of these things are totally out of my control. And like, if they don't happen, then what?
Yeah.
And so I started thinking of like, oh, I aspire to do this or I aspire. And so I love these like concrete things that are actually attainable. And I loved seeing that picture of you with your daughters in the ball gowns. I think that's so fun. It's the same like
I
if
know.
you want to wear pajamas tonight,
Right, like just do
pajamas.
it. I know. Well, it was really funny. I mean, it was funny how many people were like, "Great dress," and I was like, "Oh, people just think I'm out here like in this like formal gown, just like living my best life." Like, which I guess in this moment I am. Like okay, but yeah, it, like
Yeah.
brings you joy. I mean, and some of them are little things. I mean, little things. Like I've always thought, like, oh, I want to like do like a bone marrow registry, thing of just like that would be a nice thing to do for someone, but it's like you never get around to it. So it was just like putting things like that on a list. I mean, and it's literally like spit in a cup and send it off. Okay, like that, it took me 5 minutes. So some of these items are not like, I mean, one of them is like in a couple weeks we're doing like going to the Apollo because I've never done like amateur night at the Apollo. Like I've lived in New York for so long and I've just never done it. So it's like just a lot of things like that, just like fun, you know, yeah, like make the
That's
year.
so sweet.
And so that, yeah,
I
so that like I'm gonna like slide into 40 and feel like there's still a lot of fun stuff to do.
A
Um,
100%. I love that I saw your mantra for this year is to lean into optimism. So what does that look like in your daily life and contribute to the plan?
yeah, I mean, I think we're living in strange times, like no matter where anyone falls on any side of political things, it feels heavy and hard and weird. Um, and so I think one of the things that writing romance has given me is it's a lot of joy. And I just think um, we have to, again, it's kind of that feeling of like we're sort of doom scrolling a lot more than we used to be able to kind of like get out of things. And so I mean, and I am certainly someone who does it as well. I'll just be like, looking at things, be like, oh my God, everything's awful. And then you step outside and you're like, actually, like the world is beautiful and there's so much here and there's so much happiness and joy. And we have to lean into that because the things that you can control, do the places where you can be a good person or volunteer or give of yourself, like great, but also like we cannot control everything and we're never going to be able to. So um yeah, I think trying to like be intentional about that so that we don't go down any, and,
Yeah.
and especially like I think being a parent, for me, a lot of it is like when I am upset, it upsets my kids, which is not to say like I think it's very important for them to see again like that I am a person and that things go wrong and I don't want them to believe that like they're dead and I never have a fight or like whatever, but I also think it's like it's this thing of like, oh, if I'm upset about the state of things, like they're going to be too, and I need to find the joy so that they have joy. And I think that helps me a lot. I mean, also like little people are just like hilarious and bring a lot of joy to stuff, but um, you know, but they also bring a lot of screaming and emotional things too. So, find the joy.
No, I just think that's so lovely. And something that I want to adopt for myself too. I have a lot of friends who have kids, and so it's fun, like you say that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, like it's kind of a cool thing, like when you have friends who
They're
have kids too,
watching.
and getting to like observe that and how excited they get about things and that like childish
No.
like childhood joy. I love that.
Yeah.
So that is so fun.
It's like you want to hold on to that. It's like, oh, you like we all had this at some point, and then listen, like it's unrealistic to expect that, everyone like maintains the optimism of being a kid, but like, like there's something to that too. Yeah.
For
It's
sure. Oh my gosh, I glanced at the time because I was like, oh my gosh, we're like almost done with like the things that I had like listed for myself. I wanted to ask you, and I
like a
was
big
like,
yapper.
no, and I was like, oh my God, I've held you hostage for like a little over an hour. Like letting go of like this feeling afterwards where I'm like, gosh, I like made them talk to me for an hour.
I
I'm
mean, I
like,
have that every minute of the day. I'm like, oh God, like, did I talk too much? Did I say enough? Like, was I interesting enough? Like, like, oh, I can write, but can I speak? I mean, I think we all have, and I think it's like where, it's one of the things where it's like the pieces of yourself that come out in your writing or in your, hi, Jack.
he has to make it
Yeah,
about him. Sorry.
always. Yeah, 'cause he's a cat. He's a
Yeah.
boy cat, so he has that like doubly. But yeah, I mean, I
100%.
think it's like, I think the reminders of like, oh, we all feel that way. Like we all have those like things swirling around in our head. I think I mean it's one of the reasons I like writing in first person because like you get in, it's like, oh, we're all crazy. Okay. Like we all have this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I find it fun, like almost like Nora learning to just say it, like to be like,
Right. Just
yeah,
be
I
like,
hope
it's
that was
okay.
fun for you too. To ask you two more quick questions. But so
Yeah.
are you currently reading anything you're reading and loving that you could share?
Uh, well, I did just finish Zom Rom-Com, which I loved. I love Olivia Dade. I love Tara DeWitt's book that's coming out in May. It's called Left of Forever, which I loved. I just read Lindsay Hammeroff has a book called Never Planned on You that I just read that is it's about a wedding planner who um like 10 years earlier she like slept with a stranger and they got a tattoo together and whatever, and then she's a wedding planner and then she finds out that he's like the groom in the wedding and hijinks. And
Oh,
she's just like so funny. Like her humor, like I feel like there's a lot of like rom-coms that are called rom-coms and aren't actually funny. And that book is so funny. So I loved that one. And then I just finished a book called Aftertaste, which is about it's a little bit paranormal. Like it's not a romance. It definitely has a love story, but it is not a romance, but it is a book about a guy who realizes when he's a kid after his father passes away that he can taste like people's most important meals, like so that he'll know that like a ghost is near him because he can like taste the meal that they're thinking about. Um, and so then he goes on this journey to like be like bring people back through that. And obviously, like there are consequences to all actions. And I mean, it was a great book. It really, but yeah, it had me like staring at the wall afterwards, like, oh God, like let's think about the meaning of life and death. And then, but I mean, it's really good. That book comes out in May, and I'm obsessed with it too. So yeah, no, I'm always reading. I mean, I'm basically like, if I'm not like deep in writing something, like you, like I just am always reading. I'm really. But I have a book. The book I'm reading next is called Pomona Afton Can So Solve This Murder. So I have a murder mystery romance
mm.
that I'm about to read. So I'm excited. I need like an easy thing. So
That's
yeah.
so fun. I love that. I always love getting asking this question because I get so many books that I'm like, okay,
I
that's
know.
immediately added to my
I
TBR.
know. And then
Immediately
suddenly it's like
looking
your
this up.
TBR is 8 miles long. I know you can never get to all the books you want to read, right? Which is why if you're reading a book that you don't like, I will say like one of my people pleasing things that I've like fought against is like I have started like putting books down when I'm not enjoying them because I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? Like life is too short. And it is so hard for me. And it's also like with TV shows and stuff, like I can't quit. It's like, well, if I still watch Grey's Anatomy, like, but I can't. I'm like, well, I have to see this through, and it's like, hey, like, can you just stop if you're not enjoying it? But
I'm exactly the same way. I get that. I think a lot of people, especially because also knowing like the time that goes into it and the effort and the what
yes,
like you're like, I think that's what I think about. I'm like, oh my gosh, but wait, like I really want to
you're
like
like they really tried. I
I'm like,
know.
yeah, I'm like, and it just, and also like, knowing that that just means it doesn't resonate with me, but that other people I know might really love it. And I'm like, but I want to be able to tell them about it because I think they will really like this. And like,
I
yeah.
know, I know. But some of my favorite books are books that other people hate. So I'm like, it's if I don't like something, it's not that it's bad. It's not, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not resonating with me. And I have to like repeat that to myself over and over and over again. Because yeah, I have that feeling of like, oh God, I started it and now am I judging this writer or this person? And it's like I know how much it means to me when somebody likes what I've written because, it's like you're opening your whole heart to someone when you're writing a book, when you're creating any story, so it's like when people don't like it, it's just like but yeah, I've gotten more comfortable at just being like it's okay. I don't have time to not read it. Like I started a book recently where it was like the people become friends because their significant others are cheating on each other or cheating with the other one. It's not the Emily Henry book, it's a different one. And I just started reading it and I was like, this is depressing me. Like I don't want to go through the journey of this sadness to then get to the happiness. And I was like, that's okay. It's not for me. Like I'm sure it was for
Yeah.
some other people. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I'm so excited to look up those books too. But so I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you was what is your favorite independent bookstore?
Ugh, it's the best, the best. Okay, so um, I mean, I live in New York, so I would say the Rip Bodice is amazing for romance. I mean, it's just like a pure delight. I am really obsessed with now. Charleston has a romance bookstore, called Sweeter Than Fiction, which is
Yes.
like, and it's basically the woman who owns it, like, loves Taylor Swift and romance, and it's like I don't know. I just walk in there and I'm like, this makes me happy, and it's amazing. I'm doing an event there when I'm home in April, and I'm like so excited because I'm just like yeah, like I love those books. I mean, I really just have to say, like, I'm so happy that there are so many romance bookstores now. I mean, I live right by the Strand in New York, so I do love the Strand, but I also feel that they're a little bit snobby about romance. So
Mhm.
I would not, it's not the place that I go. Like, I'm so happy that there are these historic indie bookstores, and that's great, and you want to support the bookstores that have been around forever, but there's so many new bookstores that are just like, yeah, we're just about happiness and like, and especially like women's stories and queer stories and stories that are sort of not seen, like that are about love and happy endings and I don't know. So yeah, it's like I mean the novel Neighbor in St. Louis and Lark and Owl in Austin and I'm doing an event next week in Toronto and there's a book that like the bookstore that just opened called Hopeless Romantics. I mean, it's just I don't know. Meet Cute bookstore in San Diego is great. I mean, there's just yeah, it's like there's so like wherever you go now, there's like a bookstore that is heavily romance focused, which is amazing.
I love all the names too. I love,
I
especially when a
know.
new one opens and they have just a fantastic name. Like I saw Sweeter Than Fiction. I think I follow them on Instagram, and I'm so excited. Next time I go to North Carolina, I'm like, I'm gonna make the drive. Like I wanna. I was like, I
Yes,
really
like
want to
I want to
go.
see this. I know it's so cute. It's like, and the way she's decorated it. I mean, it's like it's just yeah, you just walk in and you're like, this is happy. I don't know. And it's like some bookstores you walk in and it's like, I have to be quiet, I have to be cool, like,
Mhm.
okay. And like I feel like the romance bookstores, it's just like the vibes are different, and so it's just like we're so lucky to have like I mean it's really like in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean it's such a new phenomenon and it's great to see that like they're doing so well that other ones are opening up because yeah, I mean who would have thought that bookstores would be growing? It's just but I think it's that there are people are creating spaces that make people feel happy and then they do events and they do things and people want to go back, in a way that maybe they didn't before when they felt like an event had to be like we're going to sit here and be very serious and it's like I don't want
Yeah.
to be serious. I want to like laugh and have a good time.
No, I love it. I love it. And those were so many great recommendations. So is there anything else that you'd like to share about Unlikely Story or any of your cookbooks or potluck or just anything that I haven't asked?
I mean, no, I feel like just it's thank you for having me. I mean, thank you for reading the book and sharing it because it really yeah, I feel like for authors it's like all we want to do is like gab about romance and books and characters and love. So thanks.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I really appreciate your time and I really appreciate your work. I'm such a big fan and I
You.
am so excited to
Right back
continue.
at you. I know. I was like, oh, no, because there's so few shows. I mean, it's just I watch so little TV now. I mean, really, because I'm like, there's just nothing for me. Like, I do not enjoy war and violence. I do not enjoy reality TV. Like, I really just want like stories about women. It's like, why is that so hard, you know? But
Yeah.
especially, I mean, so I hope you guys get another season. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you
But
so much.
I
And
still
thank you for
think, I just think
watching.
4 seasons of anything on Netflix is like, I mean, it's such a testament to how much fun people are having with it, you know, because who knows, you know, it's like, but yeah, I mean, it's, there's so few shows that like go on. It's like you fall in love with a show and then you're like, great. It gets like they all get canceled. Any of the shows that I like where it's like about women, it's like they get axed
Yeah.
immediately. So it's like, so
Ugh,
I'm glad. So thank you.
I, no, thank you so much for watching and for your support. And I loved this so much. This was so fun. And I also hope there's another season. And I'm so excited to absolutely binge Potluck because
I know,
like
just
it's
like
everything that
your
I love.
ASMR. It's like the background ASMR that everyone needs. Just like happy, easy food stuff. It's like that's yeah.
Yeah, well, I relate so much to Eric in that way. Like it's so therapeutic to me. And I was like 16 seasons. It's the same thing. I was like, this is amazing. Like
I know, but it's
I'm
like
so excited.
you're like, can we keep doing this? I know. I keep every season. I'm like, I like pop up. I'm like, does public television still exist? Like, are we gonna get to do this crazy thing again? Like, okay, you know, because it really
That
feels
is so
like,
amazing.
I mean, with streaming and whatever, it's like, but yeah, people still watch public television, so I'm gonna like hang on as long as they let us. I mean, it's a joy, you know. It really like we just get to talk about like, yeah, like cooking all day, and like no one gets voted off an island. It's delightful.
Yeah.
It's like,
Oh my
how
gosh.
often do you get that? But
No, I
anyway,
love
thank
it.
you.
Thank
And
you and
yeah,
congratulations on
thank
everything. Oh
you.
my gosh.
Thank you so much for reading and chatting. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, you too. And I'm sure we'll talk again so soon.
Yes, I know. Well, I'll see you online.
See you online. It was
I'll
so
connect
nice to
you.
meet you in
I
person
know.
and
So nice to meet you.
online and in person.
I know. And next time in New York over a black and white cookie.
I would love that. I would love that.
Great.
Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.